Trident Media Partners and Loetis Development present Strategic Planning, the connection between strategy and outcomes, and the VSCOPc methodology. A good strategy requires a strong link to real-world operations, and sound planning requires a similar connection to specific outcomes. We often see a disconnect or gap between strategy, operations, and outcomes. This happens for several reasons. Often strategy is owned by a single senior industry expert without strong planning capabilities, or without a strong planning unit in tow. Complex organizations can have multiple siloed operations or multiple uncoordinated strategies, or strategy may be driven by operations. Let's take a closer look at this challenge and a valuable planning methodology which generates a roadmap called the VSCOPc or VSCOPc diagram. All business begins with a definition of value within a sector's value chain. Value chain analysis reveals opportunities for expansion or focus, and many industries have undergone major change as a result of investment or divestment along the value chain. Outsourcing non-core functions was a theme of the 90s. From the definition of value comes an executing strategy and desired outcomes, and finally the implementation and projects to affect the strategy. Every CEO would like to see the strategy efficiently translated into outcomes via good planning and execution. Large companies with complex product offerings have a higher need for connecting these three elements. However, not all employ a specific methodology to do so. This leads to disconnect, overlap, and poor planning. The VSCOPc methodology provides a single roadmap that connects value to strategy, to capability, to outcomes, to the projects that support the outcomes, and the associated costs. Let's take a closer look. We will assume that the value proposition is well defined. The first step is to develop a time-based picture of strategy or evolution, a best-guess picture of what the company or division or product line will be over perhaps 3, 5, and 10 years. This is an iterative process that can be refined once the total picture is complete. In year 3, for example, there may be a strong core business supported by disparate databases, merged into one system in year 5, and integrated into core business in year 10, and commercialized. This could be a media or service company. We then define the capabilities required to achieve the strategy. The strategy exists in the background and ensures a meaningful link to elements of the value chain. In this way, changes to the value proposition will reflect associated changes to the capabilities. Capabilities are defined by current and intended products or operations over time. This is why the tool is often called the capability roadmap. Next, we draw the lines in the sand. When and what needs to be achieved. The specific outcomes, ensuring again that capabilities and outcomes are linked, and the organization is outcome driven. And before we can define costs, what are the specific projects required to support the capabilities and achieve the outcomes? These projects affect the strategy, and every project should support either a capability or an outcome. And finally, the costs. At any point along the roadmap, a line can be drawn to define CapEx, or in some cases OpEx, what to spend and when. We have now created a singular roadmap that connects strategy to capabilities, to outcomes, to projects, to costs. In existing operations without further refinement, the process often reveals gaps, orphans, overlap, and relevance. But most importantly, the methodology generates a flexible tool that provides context and numbers to what are often complex planning challenges. It is important to note that this is not a Gantt chart and does not reflect dependencies necessarily. It is intended to link capabilities to strategy to projects and identify the costs, and particularly the capital costs associated with the plan. Business is not static, so the plan should not be either. Outcomes can shift, which also affects spend. may be introduced or terminated, also shifting or eliminating spend. Finally, any other time-based consideration can be reflected, such as key decision points, technology changes, or financial impacts. The end result is an integrated roadmap, organized by value chain, underpinned by strategy, that provides singular context for executive decision makers and governance bodies. In its most complex form, the roadmap can also guide specific operations and planning, and, most importantly, generate a capital plan if necessary. Another benefit of the VSCOPe tool is deriving outcome-based management, where capabilities and projects are clearly linked to an outcome, and outcomes are specifically assigned and potentially integrated into executive KPIs. In the first section, we brushed over the value chain analysis process. There is nothing exceptional about the process, but it is the first step of defining capabilities and does form the foundation of the VSCOPe methodology. It is worth noting that the value chain can be replaced with functions if this is more applicable to the analysis. Let's take a brief look at 3 value chains and several participants within the first value chain for the media sector. Traditionally, for example, broadcasting has focused on making, aggregating, and packaging content, whereas subscription television has focused on presenting and distributing content into the home and owning the infrastructure. News Corp and Liberty Media are good examples of expansion across the entire value chain, owning the content itself, creating content, technology to deliver the content, infrastructure and services, and total platform branding. Another good example are individual channels such as HBO, who have traditionally focused on branding and packaging and aggregating, and have expanded into sourcing and creating their own content, thereby reducing reliance on third-party content sources. In the retail consumable value chain, a company like Coca-Cola has focused rather than expanded within the value chain. Although their operations include more ancillary products, they have focused on product and branding while outsourcing bottling and distribution in some countries. A third and unique value chain is defense. Not defense material, which has its own commercial value chain, but defense itself. Here is a sector with a strong need for coordinated capability planning. In recent years, the defense sector has focused more on core business, prosecution of operations, and outsourced support functions such as security, logistics, and constabulary roles. This allows us to take a more focused look at the land, sea, air capabilities, ensuring again connection with white paper strategy. These value chain analyses are examples of how the strategy, capability, and outcome discussions are initially framed before a VSCOPe roadmap is created. This is a very high-level description of the VSCOPe or VSCOPc methodology. The detailed process, maps, and spreadsheeting required have been omitted. The VSCOPe methodology is applicable to a range of industries, and particularly those businesses with complex operations or products, such as energy, mining, infrastructure, media, and defense. The VSCOPe methodology: many outcomes, one plan.